Joe Manchin, the senator there from West Virginia, he's having a no labels event in all places of New Hampshire. What does that mean? Let's welcome back to the program Ed Morrissey, senior editor for hotair.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Ed Morrissey. Good morning, Ed. How are you?
Good morning. Hey, it's great to be back with you guys.
Hey, we have a lot to get to. So let's start with Senator Manchin. What does a no labels event mean? Does that mean that he's maybe running as a third party candidate?
Well, that's certainly, I think, what the impression is supposed to be. My guess, though, is that what he's trying to do is he's trying to create more leverage so that the White House will cave on some of his legislative priorities. He has got to figure out whether he wants to run for Senate, whether he wants to run for governor, or whether he wants to do this, run for president on a no labels ticket. My guess is that at 77, he's got better things to do than do something quixotic like that. So I just think that what he's looking for probably is a way to restore his political standing at home and perhaps run for governor in the next election cycle in 2024, rather than run for the Senate. He's not going to win the Senate seat because Jim Justice is running against him, and Jim Justice is very popular in West Virginia. But he might have a shot at governor if he comes back with some legislative goodies over the last year and a half that he's got still left in the Senate. So I'm kind of thinking that that's what he's trying to do. Otherwise, it's really probably just an ego stroking exercise.
It's a political game. It's political theater. So this Jim Justice says running is, excuse my ignorance, is he a Republican or Democrat?
Well, he's a Republican. He's a convert to Republicans. He converted a few years ago because he like Manchin was very personally popular in West Virginia, but he, unlike Manchin, understood the shift that was going on in West Virginia and decided to respond to it by changing parties. And so he's been, I think he was elected governor as a Democrat, but flipped very early on. I'm trying to recall this, so I may not be completely accurate about that, but that's my recollection of that. And so he's very, very popular. He's sort of a colorful character, the type that you kind of expect to be popular.
I know he loves bulldogs, and he always did. During the pandemic, he would have his dog on his lap. Did you see those? Because I have two bulldogs, and I'm just
he calls the dog Baby Dog, and
Baby Dog.
Baby Dog is a very big part of the West Virginia legislature. It's sort of a lovable tradition. So I mean, it's hard to dislike a guy who likes his dog that much. And
well, the dog has his own Twitter account because I follow Baby Dog. I do on Twitter. I know. I'm a total nerd. I'm a total nerd, but I do that. So it looks like he'll be the next senator from West Virginia, and then Manchin might run for the governor's office.
Well, Manchin was governor before, right? He appointed himself to the Senate when Robert Byrd died.
Right. That's right.
And so I think he enjoyed that a lot more than he enjoyed being in the Senate. He's talked about that an awful lot, that he could get things done as governor, and being one of 100 is something entirely different. And a lot of governors go through that. They go from the governor's office to a legislative position, go through that difficult transition of not being able to actually do things. And I think it hasn't suited Manchin well, and I think he's gotten frustrated with the politics in the Senate anyway. So I think if he's running for something, my guess would be he's running for governor, but he's keeping all of his options open, including this no labels thing, which is going to take place in New Hampshire, where he's partnering up with John Huntsman, who actually has been sort of a no labels guy in his career. Manchin's just been a Democrat. Even when it hasn't suited him to be a Democrat, he's refused to change. Huntsman's been he's a Republican, but he worked for Barack Obama. He worked for Donald Trump. Is one of the few probably who got political appointments from both Obama and Trump.
And I can't believe he lost the governor's race in Utah to Cox, and I was surprised at that. All right, but speaking of people who are changing parties, Mesha Mainor, state rep from Georgia, representing Atlanta, one of the bluest districts. In fact, it's so blue that Biden won by 89%. She has a message for Black Americans.
The Democrat Party has not been focusing on Black Americans for quite a while now. We cannot say that we care about people in marginalized communities if we want to keep them suppressed and oppressed. One of the things that bothered me the most is when I would ask them, why are we doing this? Why is it okay for kids to not be able to read? Their response to me was, we've got to give them hope. In response, I would say, since when is a lie hope? If you really care about black people, the black people that are elected need to do something about the issues for the black people that they represent.
And Ed, I just love her. She comes across as very gracious. She puts children before unions. She puts her community before trying to defund police. And she's truly serving her constituents and her conscience. But she has an re-election next year. And, she says she's like, she knows that, there's a chance that the Democrat Party might put somebody up against her. But do you think that will happen? Are they going to do that?
Probably.
Yeah.
My guess is that they'll put somebody up against her, and she'll probably lose because of the way that district is is set up. I would hope not, but I think she understands that too. So I think that this is even more selfless than it might even first seem. But yes, I mean, if she's changed over to the Republican Party, you just have to remember how all these things work, right? You have districts, and this is true at the state level as well, where you have people who are waiting for their turn to run for an office, and as soon as an opening comes up, you'll have a number of people that will jump into it. So I have no doubt that they're going to run an opposition to her in the next election. I'm curious to see how well that does. A lot of that has to do with who the candidate is, and but I'm wondering if her frustration is shared widely in the district, and I think that it might be. It really depends on. I think really depends on who's higher up on the ticket as to how well that goes. But I think it's incredibly selfless, I think, for her to do that in that situation. So, if going back to the previous talk, if Joe Manchin flipped to the Republican Party, everybody would understand why, right? There wasn't a blue county in the last two elections in West Virginia, not one. The Republicans won them all by wide margins. So if Joe Manchin said, well, you know what, I think the Democratic Party has left me and I'm a Republican, we'd understand that there was a healthy dose of self-preservation. You can even say the same thing about Jim Justice. But this particular legislator, it's the opposite. She's doing something that is clearly not in her long-term political interest. She's sacrificing a political career that probably would have been very easy to maintain by doing this.
Because she's now
it's so much more powerful.
She's now the first state rep ever, first black woman, I should say, to ever serve as a Republican in the Georgia Assembly. So hopefully we'll see how long she lasts. All right, let's move on to Capitol Hill and Christopher Wray. He denies that the FBI tried to censor conservatives. What say you, Ed Morrissey?
Oh, it's nonsense. I was just watching Jonathan Turley on Fox News, and Turley is really unhappy about that testimony yesterday. He's saying that they're playing Congress. He's playing Congress and the American people for chumps, and he's right. I mean, there's all sorts of documentary evidence that they were suppressing conservative viewpoints. They were suppressing dissent. All you have to do is read Judge Terry Dowdy's 155-page memorandum to see the evidence that has already been presented after discovery in Missouri versus Biden. And you can see that it's clearly intentional. It's clearly viewpoint suppression. So to get up there and say, oh, no, we never did that is ridiculous. It's an absolute lie. You can't even say, well, I am not aware of this. This is a program that's been in place for a couple of years. It's being operated out of Washington, D.C., and if the FBI director isn't aware of something like that going on, he should resign immediately and apologize for his complete incompetence. I mean, it's a lie. He's lying about this. He's gaslighting everybody. And it's not just on that. I wrote something about the Richmond, Virginia office going after supposedly radical traditional Catholics.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, well, we're still doing our investigation of that. It's been 5 months. They're investigating themselves. This is the supposedly the premier investigative agency in the world, and it's taken them 5 months to investigate themselves, and they still haven't figured it out.
Well, are you a domestic extremist if you go to the Latin Mass?
Yeah.
You Catholics?
White supremacy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's white supremacy.
White supremacy.
White supremacy, radical. Yeah, it's. I mean, if you go to the Latin Mass, I don't think they have an idea of what a rad trad Catholic actually is. It's a couple of cranks on Twitter, I think, and they decided that it was a great way to leverage their way in, because the SPLC told them that these, the rad trad Catholics oppose abortion rights. I don't know how to explain this to people, but the whole Catholic Church opposes abortion.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not just the rad trads here. I mean, that it's just so blatantly political. And he was up there saying, well, I don't really know. We haven't really had a chance to finish our investigation. Maybe by next month we can tell you about this. Yeah. It's like, this should have taken 2 days. It's your own office down there. He's
so smug. I think it also depends on who's the subject of the investigation, how quickly they move. I think that's the new FBI model. But you were right, Ed. Jim Justice, he was a registered Republican, but he ran as a Dem, and he beat Bill Cole in West Virginia.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So let's talk about why Trump's attorney wants to push off this classified material trial. They don't want this indictment looming over his head as he's running for office. You think that what do you think will be the outcome of this?
Well, I think they're afraid that he's going to get convicted, and that's the reason why they're trying to push it off. I mean, if they believe their own PR on this about the Presidential Records Act, then you'd want to get into court right away, because you should be able to dispense with this right away. If they believe their own rhetoric about, instant declassification and the Presidential Records Act. I think the attorneys, I think that's one thing for, political consumption, but I think the attorneys are looking at this and saying, we're in deep trouble here, and it's better to have the indictment hanging over your head than a conviction hanging over your head.
Yeah.
And so they're going to try to postpone this as long as possible. And I think they'll probably get their way. There's usually in the court system, defendants have a pretty wide latitude, not total latitude, but they have a pretty wide latitude to request continuances, because the prohibition on, or rather I should say the constitutional requirement for speedy trials binds, prosecutors, not the defendants. The defendants can waive that, and if they argue that they need more time to prepare a defense, courts are usually pretty deferential to those types of requests. But it remains to be seen whether or not this particular judge is going to say, yeah, we're not going to put this off till 2025.
Yeah.
If you want to go, we'll go in December, we'll go in March, but we're not going to do it in March of 2025.
Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, though. Because with this Jack Smith special assignment, whatever it's called, did they make Trump's lawyer testify against Trump? Isn't that breaking privilege, and isn't that a scary road to go down?
Well, I mean, it is a tricky road to go down, and this is not unprecedented. If you are working with an attorney, and the attorney himself or herself gets entangled in criminal activity, then there is a well-established exception to the attorney-client privilege under those circumstances, and that is arguably what happened here. He used an attorney to represent that they had turned over all the boxes, or this is a little bit more complicated. When it was clear that they hadn't done it, and so the attorney was then caught in making a material misrepresentation to investigators and to the court, which is illegal.
Right. And, which is alleged, because we still don't know what was in those boxes, because from what I understand, they only found 100 and some odd documents that were labeled classified or anything like that. But then they show all these thousands of boxes.
Right. Well, okay, so I don't know what to believe.
There's two things here. One is the classified documents, right? The classified material.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is material that doesn't belong to him either.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's classified or not. Under the Presidential Records Act, it was supposed to go to the National Archives the day that he left office. Yeah. And that was what they were trying to get back. It wasn't just the classified material. Presidential Records Act requires that material to be returned to the National Archives, or turned over to the National Archives as your term is expiring. There is no grace period in the Presidential Records Act. The idea is during a transition, you're supposed to bring in the National Archives to work with you so that all of that can be transferred the day that your term ends.
Yeah, but is it criminal, though? Because remember, I think what they're going to try to do is the Clinton sock drawer, the tapes in the sock drawer. I think that's probably going to be one of their defenses, right?
No, this is again that's more for political hay than it is in court. The Clinton Sox thing was that the National Archives didn't think that that was a presidential record. And Judicial Watch sued the National Archives to tell them to change it to a presidential record so that they could seize those tapes back. And the National Archives refused, and the judge in that case said, we don't have the authority to tell the National Archives to reclassify that material. Or not classify, to relabel that material. We don't have the authority to tell the National Archives to make that into a presidential record. Now, and they said if the National Archives decided to do that, they could turn that over to the Department of Justice and have the Department of Justice pursue it. They've just chosen not to do that, and we can't tell them to do otherwise. That was what the Clinton Sox case was about, and. So no, that doesn't apply here. The National Archives immediately started asking for that material, and then when they weren't getting it back, they turned it over to the Department of Justice. And the Presidential Records Act has that, gives them that authority and gives the Department of Justice that authority to enforce that. And even after all of that, if they had turned over all the boxes and gotten it over, especially when the grand jury issued a subpoena for it, they probably never would have prosecuted this. They probably would have just made it go away because it's embarrassing to everybody, but that's not what happened. They lied about where the boxes were. They defied the grand jury subpoena, and that's the reason why there is why you have this indictment now. And that's the reason why the attorneys for Trump are going to try to postpone this as long as possible, because it's bad enough having the indictment in place.
Well,
but if he gets convicted of it during the presidential cycle, it's going to be even worse.
Yeah, but we still have two other. I mean, so he's indicted on the presidential records. He's indicted with the Stormy Daniels hush money case in New York. We still have two other cases pending, one in Fulton County, Georgia, and another one in D.C. with January 6th. When are those? I know the one on Georgia, isn't that put on hold until?
Well, it was put on hold because of a term of office thing. I think that they're going to reconvene in August, and that's when they expect to have the indictment drop on that. That one's probably a significant one. The one with the Stormy Daniels thing, the Alvin Bragg indictment is a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an absolute joke. There's no way that one works. But this one is serious. I'm not sure about the one in Fulton County, Georgia, because I haven't seen what they're trying to cook up there. But the January 6th one could be serious if there's anything indictable from that, which is not clear at this point in time, because at least on the surface he didn't do anything that would be legally considered incitement.
Right.
We'll see what else people have testified to, but at the moment that doesn't. I would be surprised if on the fact record that we have, at least at the moment, I'd be surprised to see an actual indictment against Trump coming out of that investigation. This one's serious enough.
I mean, it's got to be exhausting being President Trump.
Yeah.
You have to have a team of attorneys around you at all times, and not just one team, 2 teams, 3 teams, 5 teams of attorneys.
It pays to be rich, huh?
Oh, I don't know about that. All right, Ed Morrissey, we're going to have to leave it there today. Anything you want to promote that you're working on today?
We're going to be dropping another Amiable Skeptics episode tomorrow with Adam Baldwin. We're going to be talking about the Sound of Freedom movie in that particular episode, so I hope everybody gets a chance to sign up for VIP and watch that episode.
Oh, good, because we're having next half hour, we're having somebody from the National Center on Sexual Exploitation and giving us some tips how we can help and stop end child trafficking once and for all.
Excellent.
Great. So I'm glad you're doing that. Glad you're part of the fight. All right, Ed Morrissey, follow him on Twitter at Ed Morrissey, senior editor for hotair.com. Always a pleasure, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
for having me.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I'm Dave Nissen, CEO of PKF Mueller. As a CPA firm, we have been serving our business clients since 1968 by providing audit, accounting, tax, advisory, and consulting services. We as trusted advisors go beyond what our clients hired us to do by thinking outside the box to understand their operations and industry. We want to discover ways to increase their net income and cash flow by reducing costs or increasing efficiencies. To this end,